party people, how you doing? So, today we have the complete comparison between the X60 Pro Plus and the OnePlus 9 Pro. Now, I think that both of these being flagships and having exactly the same price tag, well, many people are going to be considering both of these if they're going to be looking for flagships. But the fact is that these smartphones are very different, like fundamentally, and are made for very different people. So depending on that, your decision might either give you a fantastic smartphone that you're gonna love using, or it could give you one which you're not gonna enjoy all that much. So I'm here to break it down so that you know exactly which one you need to buy depending on your requirements. So firstly, we have the design. Now both of these, in my opinion at least, have fantastic designs, but they're fairly different from each other. So the OnePlus 9 Pro, it's got a matte glass finish. It's amazing, I love the texture here, and it's also black. That's the only color which has a matte finish, if I'm not wrong. At least the silver one doesn't have a matte finish, that much I'm sure. But on the other hand, we have the X60 Pro Plus. This one goes for a leather finish, which I feel like is kind of unique and is definitely not present on majority of the smartphones, that's for sure. Most of them are glass sandwiches, and that's good. The OnePlus 9 Pro is amazing. When you hold it in your hand, the texture, the matte finish, fingerprint resistance, it's all there. But same goes for the X60 Pro Plus, except for the fact that it's even more grippy, and we should award a point to the X60 just for being different and unique alone. I know it's not such a big deal, but the X60 is still, I like the way Vivo took the design. Anyways, the camera module, well, the X60 is much bigger compared to the OnePlus. Yeah, the camera module is more subtle on the OnePlus, while being a little bit more industrial looking, like it looks very professional on the X60. I kind of like that. I also like that we have this sort of a spiral finish on the camera lens itself, so that's definitely nice to see. It reflects light in a kind of unique way. I like that. And so, the camera module, I do prefer it on the X60 here, but I can easily see why one would prefer the OnePlus 9 Pro. So for the most part, I'm gonna call the camera module a tie. As for the front, it's exactly the same. We have curved glass, and neither of them have any kind of palm rejection issues so far as I've used them. So yeah, curved glass, you either love it or you hate it. In my case, I really like curved glass, so that's just me. So yeah, all in all, both of these phones have great design. I like the X60 because it's a little bit more unique, but I can see why one would prefer the OnePlus, because man, it looks and feels great regardless of however you see it. Alright, now let's talk about display, because this is where the differences really start to come. So the OnePlus 9 Pro on paper has a better display. It's 1440p compared to just 1080p. I mean, just is the wrong way to put it. 1080p is still plenty fine. You won't actually see the pixels unless you're really eagle-eyed enough. And both of these are 120Hz. The X60, however, does not have variable 120. The OnePlus does. So you will be able to save a little battery in case you have a static image on your screen. But that is sort of a double-sided sword, because the variable 120, at least that's what I feel is a culprit in giving us micro stutters. Like, it happens every once in a while, but it has happened enough times that I feel quite annoyed by it. It really stands out, especially because OnePlus goes for fluidity and smoothness so hard with their campaign and all that. It really sticks out on the OnePlus 9 Pro. I really wish it wasn't this way, but that's just how it is. So overall, I feel like the X60 is a bit more stutter-free and thus offers a better day-to-day experience when you're just scrolling through, using Instagram, scrolling through the Google feed, stuff like that. Content consumption, however, well, this is where I think the OnePlus is gonna take a slight upper hand. Now, overall brightness is fairly comparable, and the content is great on both. Now, overall SDR normal video that you're gonna watch on YouTube, hopefully including this one, well, those are very good in both. I didn't really find any issues whatsoever, but in content consumption, we do have the speaker experience as well. Now, this may or may not matter to you depending on how much you use your phone speakers to watch videos, but the X60 has a mono speaker. Now this was a big complaint last year as well, but even so, it's not been improved upon, and we do not have a stereo speaker experience. I mean, the mono speaker is loud, but it's still not gonna come close to even the experience that you're gonna get from the stereo speaker set that we have on the OnePlus 9 Pro. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you want good content consumption, just go with the OnePlus. It's gonna be better. Pretty much a similar state for HDR as well. HDR videos look very good, and it looks especially good on the OnePlus 9 Pro because we have 10-bit color here. That's very important for HDR, and it removes any kind of color banding that you might see on the X60 Pro Plus. So definitely keep all of this in mind and make your decision. I would say even with the micro stutters, just how good the content consumption is on the OnePlus 9 Pro, I think it's worth it. I would give display overall a win to the OnePlus 9 Pro. I mean, it also has 1440p, so that's definitely a very good thing as well. So now, before we move on to the cameras, because let's face it, that's where majority of the differences between these two are gonna lie, let's take a hot second here and talk about performance and battery life. So performance is gonna be essentially the same across the board. I haven't noticed any issues whatsoever. We have the best Snapdragon chipset here. So yeah, it's all good in terms of performance. Battery life, however, I feel like battery is a little bit better on the OnePlus 9 Pro. I've gotten slightly more screen on time on the OnePlus compared to the X60 here. X60 isn't bad, you're still gonna reach 6 hours, but going beyond that, like between 6 to 6.5 hours, that's gonna be much more possible with the OnePlus 9 Pro. And it's also because OnePlus has a larger battery. It's 300 mAh more on the OnePlus, so it's kind of expected that battery life is gonna be better. Now then, the cameras. This is where all the juicy details are gonna lie after all. Let's begin with photography. Now, I have made camera reviews for both of these phones. I do recommend checking those out for all the nuanced details. But overall, I feel like photography is better on the X60 compared to the OnePlus, and there are a few reasons for it. Firstly, I feel like both have great main and ultra-wide sensors, but in broad daylight, the overall color accuracy is better on the X60. And as for the ultra-wide, well, sometimes I felt like the detail that you get is gonna be slightly superior on the OnePlus, but regardless of that, I still think overall photography in broad daylight is gonna be better on the X60. And more importantly, the X60 also has much better overall human subjects. Like, it can handle skin tones much better, it can handle contrast when there's a bright light on your face much better. And overall, I prefer it far more than the OnePlus 9 Pro. Some might like how the OnePlus does things, it sometimes kind of reddens skin, and if you like the look, you might enjoy it. But overall, for most people, I still feel like the X60 is definitely gonna be better here. And we also have 2x zoom with portraits, so that's definitely important in terms of taking photos of human subjects. And that's really not possible on the OnePlus 9 Pro. We have a 3x optical zoom at 8 megapixels here, but it doesn't use that, it just crops in into 2x. And then for night mode, I think this is where the gap really widens, because in night mode, OnePlus has a pretty serious flaw, because in normal low light conditions where you take a night mode photo for like 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, both are very comparable, both can produce really nice photos. But when the light gets even more dim and you gotta take like a 5, maybe a 6 second of exposure, well, that's when the OnePlus just dips out. It won't even go for that. At best, maybe on the ultra wide and ultra low light situations, you're gonna get 4 seconds. That's the best you're gonna get. On the X60, however, it's a completely different story. On the main camera, you can take very good long exposures, and that does help out with details by quite a bit. You can check out all the camera comparisons that I've done. The X60 has consistently come out on top in low light situations. Same goes for the ultra wide, and even more so, because not only do we have a really good sensor for the X60, it also uses the stabilization that is built into the ultra wide camera to provide like 7, maybe even 8 seconds worth of exposure without bringing any jerks in. That's just how good the gimbal stabilization is on the X60. So yes, all in all, I think photography is without question a win for the X60 here. Videos, however, well, that's where the OnePlus kind of pulls ahead. because videos on the X60 are just not good. Compared to even the bare minimum, I think it still falls apart. Mainly because of two reasons. Firstly, the video from the X60 has some issues with exposure, especially when the lighting is changing. You're gonna run into some trouble there. Secondly, the HDR, I think that's a bigger problem here, because there are sometimes exposure issues on the OnePlus 9 Pro as well, but the HDR is where it really has a huge problem. It blows out highlights and crushes shadows very often, and you're gonna get video that you're probably gonna feel is subpar, especially for the price tag. But hey, that's kind of like the price for getting such good photography. You're gonna lose out on video. That's kind of expected, and that is exactly what's happening here. OnePlus, on the other hand, goes for a slightly more balanced approach. Photography isn't quite as top-notch as the X60, but in videos, it actually performs really well. I think it's kind of underrated in terms of how good the video is on the OnePlus 9 Pro. Especially when you go to something like 4K 60, 8K, especially 8K with the ultra-wide, those are truly fantastic, and I haven't found a device that can really rival the OnePlus 9 Pro in video in such high stakes modes like 8K and 4K 60. And by the way, we also have 4K 120 slow-mo on the OnePlus 9 Pro, so I think it's pretty obvious that video is definitely something the OnePlus does better compared to the X60. X60 can be usable, but if you really want good video, go for the OnePlus. No questions asked. So that's about a wrap for all the major differences here. There are minor differences in software as well. I think both are very good, both are very close to stock Android as well. Both of them have a Google feed, if that's something you're interested in. I'm personally very fond of good Google feeds, and both of them can provide that. And both of them also have very fluid overall animations. The OnePlus obviously has some stutters. That's probably because of the 1 to 120 Hz variable refresh rate, but regardless of that, the major difference here is probably going to boil down to the fact that the OnePlus with Oxygen OS gives a bit more of a stable and more user-friendly feature set. I know for a fact that many people love Oxygen OS because of how close it can get to stock Android. But on the other hand, there's the X60, which is fairly close to stock Android and just how it looks and feels, but it does offer some absolutely ridiculous options in terms of the animations, for face unlock, for fingerprint unlock, for how the unlock happens. There's a bit more customization built into the X60, while the OnePlus is going to be a more familiar OS for most people, at least that's how I think it is. And another thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to go for the X60 Pro Plus, we will be getting a new software skin called Origin OS from Vivo. That's probably going to come out later this year, so definitely stay on the lookout for that. I have quite high hopes for that one. I enjoy using FunTouch OS. There are certain weird things, but regardless of that, FunTouch OS is not bad. How good Origin OS is going to be, well, that's the real question. Definitely stay tuned for that. If you want a coverage of it, definitely hit that subscribe button. So that is the end of this complete comparison. I think at this point the answer is pretty clear. These two phones are made for very different people, and depending on your use case, go for the one you want. If you want content consumption, OnePlus is the one to go for. If you want good videography, what do you expect? It's gonna be the OnePlus. The opposite is true for the X60. Phenomenal photography. The camera is definitely the place where Vivo spent most of its time, and it kind of paid off, I want to say. I've enjoyed using these cameras unlike many of the phones out there. So I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.